How do you feel about organ meats? We haven't talked about these yet. And beyond the carnivore world, these have a lot of momentum in the health and wellness space. People taking different capsules, having liver in whole food form, raw, cooked. Is this something, I know you don't supplement, but is whole food liver part of your diet?
I don't eat much organs. I think if you're eating like a standard diet or, more plant-based diet or coming from, one of those, liver is probably your best friend. It's very nutrient dense. It has a lot of these things. It can catch you up. It's just a vitamin in an organ. It's very bioavailable. It has a lot of very good things, and it's very available to us. You take a pill, you're peeing out most of that, but you're also just pooping out most of that because you're not absorbing a lot of it. So there's that idea of bioavailability that's very important. Liver is very bioavailable. You get most of that out of the liver. I don't think you have to have it. I've tested my bloods, I've tested my vitamins and things like that, years into a carnivore diet, just beef and water mostly, not really eating any organs. And like I said, my levels were in that optimal range of someone that we'd seen in their mid-20s that is in good health. So I don't think you need it. I know the Inuits traditionally don't eat the organs, and the polar explorers that went up and lived with them. There's a professor of ethnology at Harvard 100 years ago, Vilhjalmur Stefansson, who wrote a book called The Fat of the Land, and he lived with the Inuits for 10 years, 12 years, and ate as they did, and went like, wow, there's something to this. We should look into this. And so he promoted an all meat diet, a high fat meat diet. And he would say specifically, you don't need organs. We never ate organs. The Inuit didn't eat organs. In fact, the organs of a marine mammal probably you shouldn't eat because it's such a high vitamin A content, like in the liver, that it can kill you. You can get hypervitaminosis, and one of the best examples of that is the polar bear liver has so much vitamin A, it will just kill you. You really can't eat any of it. It's very toxic because of the vitamin A. I don't think that you have to ever eat it out of proportion of the animal. If we're thinking biologically, if we're thinking, what happens in nature, then you hunt an animal, you take it down, you take down a bison or something like that. And that's a big, massive, strong animal. And that's probably going to feed, you or I as an individual for 2 years. And it has one liver. It's a big liver, but there's only one of it. And so you're going to have 100, 200 times the amount of skeletal muscle, meat, and fat to that liver. And so I think you just keep that in proportion. I don't think you have to do it. I've had liver 3 times in the last decade. And so, it's not something that I go after, but if you want some liver, have some liver. If it tastes good, I think that's a good sign that your body probably wants some of it. Of those 3 times that I've had liver, first of all, raw liver tastes way better than cooked liver. That is something that I learned, and I did the same thing where I lightly salted it. Put thin strips on the drying racks and let it dry out for a few days. And I found that it sort of dried out the texture. It wasn't slimy, and it was sort of gummy. It was sort of a gummy, chewy liver candy. It was actually delicious. And I really like gummy candies. That's probably one of the only things I miss, is that just that tactile experience of chewing on a gummy candy, like a gummy bear or something like that. And the liver dried out for probably like 4 days, had that consistency, had that texture. So it was like this gummy candy. I'm like, that's amazing. But it tasted like meat. So it was this meat gummy. I'm like, this is perfect. That's exactly what I want. And so I'd have a piece of that. I'm like, I want another one. I want another one. And I'm like, I don't really want another one after that. So it's that same thing. You're just listening to your body, you're listening to your taste. And it's like, that's tasting really good. That's tasting really good. And like, yeah, it's not really tasting great anymore. And so I just stopped. The next day I'd have another couple pieces and things like that. And then, when I was sort of done with it, I was just like, I don't really want to do that again. So my body was happy with the amount of nutrients that I got, and I could go from there. There are some people that are going to metabolize vitamins and minerals and nutrients slightly different than other people, and so maybe they need a bit like folate. I have more than enough folate because of what I'm eating, but I've come across 2 people personally now that have had lower folates, and it's something you would see in the forums. Some people having a bit low folate. Those people probably do need to incorporate some liver in their diet, because there's a lot more folate in the liver. So I don't think you need to take any supplements or anything, do anything special unless you have a diagnosed deficiency. And again, the animals that we evolved eating were eating what they were supposed to eat on very rich, fertile land. And so the nutrient profile was very different as well. And so maybe for some people, it's just not quite enough to do that with store-bought skeletal muscle, meat, and fat. Maybe you need to go to the organs as well, and that's perfectly fine. And then maybe other people, for some reason, have a bit of a deficiency in one thing or the other, and in which case, I think supplementation is fine in those cases. If liver is not enough and you need to take a specific, vitamin D or zinc or something like that, fine. I don't think there's a big deal with that, as long as you actually need it. I don't think anyone needs to take a supplement that they don't actually have, of something that they're not actually deficient in. And so just check your bloods. And if beef is not enough and you add in liver and that does the job, great. And if liver's not quite enough and you need to take a pill, take a pill. That's not a big deal.
Earlier, you talked about the difference between having optimal ranges of labs versus standard. When you're eating this amount of meat, have you ever had the problem of B12 going too high or iron going too high and having to moderate or change up the way you're eating?
No, and specifically in the context of that optimal range, right? Because if we were looking at the lab ranges, yes, that would definitely be too high. And so, but that's fine. I want to be higher than the reference ranges that they use. Specifically for B12, B12 is one that most people are deficient in. And because of that, the reference ranges reflect that. They reflect deficiency. And so the range for most reference ranges for B12 in most countries, actually the lower end is well below deficiency levels. So here it's picograms per milliliter, and the reference range is about 130 something, depending on, every lab has a different reference range, because it's just a different community and different population, right? And so about 130 picograms per milliliter to about 620 picograms per milliliter. That's a rough range, and it's a similar sort of range in America and Canada, in the units that are used there. So that below 400 is actually vitamin B12 deficiency. There's studies showing that you can actually get demyelination of the axons of your nerves and neurological damage with lower than 400 picograms per milliliter. So that's a deficiency, and yet between 130 and 600 is normal, right? So 100, there's 250 points in there that are considered normal, right? So you can have someone go in and your doctor doesn't know this about the reference ranges, and then you say, oh yeah, your B12 is 300. Yeah, you're fine. You say, oh, I'm kind of tired. I don't really feel great. This and that. Well, let's check your B12, and like, oh, look at that. Well, your B12 is normal, so no, that's not a problem, and missing out on an actual deficiency. So a better range that we would see in young healthy adults is 800 to 1200. So even what I would say is the lower end of where you want for good health is actually 150 points above the upper limit for the reference ranges, because the reference ranges are the average for the community. It's not the range of good health. And that's a very important distinction. And so, with folate or iron and all these sorts of things, again, people are chronically iron deficient. They're chronically deficient in these different vitamins and minerals. And so having slightly higher than those reference ranges is actually a good idea. There are doctors that do have a better understanding of the optimal reference ranges. And you can probably find them usually under the name of preventative medicine, functional medicine, metabolic health, sort of those sorts of clinics will be, they'll probably be more in tune with the actual, reference ranges that of good health, as opposed to just the community. And so my levels are pretty much in those levels for a 25-year-old. Not everything, but they're close, and they're a lot better than most people.
Anthony, you've been super generous with your time. I really appreciate that. Before we wrap up, I want to end on this. And you talked about the gummies, the liver being like a gummy candy. It got me thinking about snacking. So, say you're a really busy guy, so I don't know how often this happens, but say on a Saturday night, you and your girlfriend are watching a movie and you want to have a snack. On a carnivore diet, what does that look like? Or do you ever snack?
I generally think that if you're hungry enough to snack, you're probably hungry enough to eat, and so you should just eat and have a meal. But if and I think it's probably a good way of leaving it. Is just if you're sort of snacking and eating just because you're bored, probably not a good idea. But there are snacks. There are things that you can have that are just sort of fun. Like biltong is a South African sort of jerky that they just sort of dry out and they sort of cut against the grain, so it's very easy to chew. Sometimes it's soft; it's not completely dry and hard. That's delicious, and it's just meat popcorn sort of thing. So you could have a bag of biltong and watch a movie. And you could even do like steak bites and things like that. I generally just eat though. Probably the only thing we snack would be like a treat would be like I get some biltong or called dry wurst, which is dried sausage. And this is again, they do a lot of these in South Africa. And I get ones that don't have a bunch of spices and seasonings. I like ones that just have salt, and so it's just meat, fat, and salt, and so you can sort of snack on that. But generally, I just eat until I'm full, and then I'm just not hungry, and I don't think about food after that.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
No animal eats the variety of plants that we do, and I think that that's causing and driving most of the modern non-communicable chronic diseases that we face these days. It is the complete elimination diet because it gets rid of everything you